It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm usually online for the symposium, so I am very grateful to D'Angela for the invitation to come in person to speak. I'm Crystal Wise. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota in literacy education. Um, I would say most of my research focuses on actually early literacy development and instruction. I'm a former teacher. But I also look at, within African American studies, look at the historical and contemporary literacy practices of African Americans, and one in particular, Prince. So I love to look at Prince's lyrics. And Adam, your presentation, awesome setup, because I will be digging further into that early, you call a plot summary, early script of Purple Rain that was featured in The Beautiful Ones. I guess we can call it a memoir, right? That was published in 2019. And so when I got to that moment in the memoir, I'm not clicking going forward. Let's see. Of course, it's easy to be inspired by Prince, right? And so within that script, he says, if there's something out there that you want, go for it. Nothing comes to sleepers but dreams. So go for it, kind of in the literal sense, but also in the idea of right pursuing your dreams. As we know, that first script was titled Dreams when William Blinn started on it after right consulting or talking with Prince and them moving into the idea of creating a movie for Purple Rain, and then later the screenplay developed by Albert Magnoli. And so me thinking about right historical and contemporary literacy practices of African Americans, what I wanted to go back to this original writing to see how right Prince as a Black kid, Black person navigating Minneapolis, what is there, right? What is there in his story writing of kind of a semi-autobiographical? We know that is clearly not in all aspects true to his life. But that's where it's really important to look at, right, this idea if you're dreaming, if you're trying to go beyond where you are or make it, right, there are things based in reality, but you have to kind of have a vision of something else. So what actually is there? And so I think that's a beautiful gift that we got within this memoir. So, why would I come to this early script? We know that vanity was originally supposed to be part of the script, and we have Prince and Morris Day who are maintained. And so, what's interesting is, right, in that script, which I'll lay out later on, is thinking about Prince kind of locating himself actually all around the city of Minneapolis and navigating that. But he situates, we'll see Morris Day kind of in the downtown area, and he puts Vanity's character, kind of like he just says, somewhere in the suburbs. So what is this representing? What is this showing? And so my argument today really is to kind of think through, if we kind of look through this, the script, and we kind of think of Prince kind of mapping out his experience is in Minneapolis. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to claim it. Prince is a geographer. And he's practicing and engaging Black geographies. So this is some early work that I'm doing and a project that I'm working on to kind of think through if we're going through, right, this plot summary, this early script, if it would, if some elements would have been maintained, what do we see differently? How do we see Prince as a geographer? How is this him engaging some very important literacy practices that I think may or may not continue to come through in the movie that we later see? Okay, so some frameworks that I use, I am not, well, I guess it may be, in some ways in terms of literacy, because we have different literacies, but I do not claim to be a geographer myself. But using a theoretical frameworks out of Black geographies, that is really kind of we shouldn't call it a new discipline, because what's really important in Black geographies, as I'm reading through this, is that we understand that because of the traditions of geography that have mostly kind of concerned itself with just kind of documenting racial differences and inequalities, but it's not really showing how racism is actually right this spatial practice that we're reconstructing and constructing, right, racism based on space, right? You think through like segregation. And so that's in part kind of showing that map, how Prince is kind of navigating, which is a very resistant move, right, that he's making to show that he's traversing in his world, right, what he's creating, he's traversing these different worlds, which may or may not be as easy as he's kind of showing through his script or how we maybe see him in the movie. But this is what is important in the counter storytelling. That's what's important to kind of coming back to and using a framework like Black geographies and combining it with critical race theory to understand counter storytelling and looking not just within academic text, but these other texts that we have. This is why it's making, right, for me, and hopefully I can convince others, this early plot summary an important text, because it is showing, beyond kind of in just the music realm or entertainment realm, we have a documentation of someone practicing Black geographies and engaging in space making, right, to make their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations come true on space, on land that their ancestors came to. That was not, the practice. Oftentimes, as I'll go to it now to bring up, if we think about what are Black world making practices, going to the text from Hawthorne, who in about the same time, 2019, wanted to do a review, again, to try to help document what is Black geographies. And in that review, she talks about how what are some of these Black world making practices, and that's what the goal is. I'll do is illustrate how in that early script or plot summary, we can see how Prince is actually doing some of the things that are thematic within Black world making practices, right? So starting from the idea that all social relations are grounded in spatial relations. So the different ways that we'll kind of go through it, how he's engaging with, the characters are engaging with one another, how the characters are engaging with their space. And then also counter long-standing trends in the field about geography that we see Black people as either lacking geography or victims of geography. So again, thinking about segregated spaces, how is that really showing up? How is Prince highlighting that in his storytelling, and how is he resisting that as well? Asserting that racism is a spatial practice, and that to be one of those practices is unfortunately anti-Blackness, where it's labeling Blackness as placeless and out of place. And so what Prince does in this plot summary is, in fact, or even I think throughout, especially attaching himself to Minneapolis, is gives himself a place, which I argue is a act of resistance. So let's get into some interesting parts of the script that I'm coming to. So we have, this little made up map here that, that I put together. But we have, this is the story of the dreams. This is on the first page of the plot summary, and aspirations of three individuals. And mostly within that first section of it, I don't know how recently you all read it, but I kind of get the feeling people have read that in this room. It's very interesting the way that he just talks through who the individual characters are. And that's the first structure. Then we go into a structure where he talks about, and this is why I'm claiming that Prince is a geographer, is that he then goes into the second section, which it does kind of appear to be written possibly at different times. He goes into the city. The city Morris Vanity and Prince live in is appropriately divided into three sections. And so first we have them as individuals being described, then we have them being described in terms of where they are located. And so these are some excerpts from how does he describe the individuals. And remember, one of those Black world making practices is to kind of think through how, right, all social interactions, or how do people interact with their place, right, where they are, their space and place. So Morris, he situates him within the being stuck in the ghetto, and that's part of I'm sure Adam's narrative analysis can kind of show how that storytelling and what the conflict is there. Is that he's conflicted with these three vices, he says, are money, music, and women, which necessarily, in and of themselves, don't have to necessarily be vices, but the way Prince writes it is in part, right, there's something that's happening here. The way that Morris is interacting with him is because he's in what Prince names the ghetto. Then he moves to the second individual. We get a little bit more in the characterization here with who it was going to be Vanity. And she's viewed as a phony rich, and I'll say that word there, by most of the kids in every neighborhood she's ever moved. So he is, again, he's locating Vanity, and he's moving her across, but there's something about how she's not able, even by place, right, to connect as an individual. And again, her class is kind of brought out here, but it's, again, he's moving her in different places and showing that there's something about how her individual self and her body, her being, is not quite allowing her to fit in. And then for himself, mostly situates himself in terms of, it's mostly talking through his parents in his individual summary here. And so what we find is kind of the locations or places is talking about how his family was supposed to be a clean, quiet, and Christian home. We know the conflict with the mom is that she's opposite of that, likes to drink and play loud music. His place is that he's, again, kind of connected to kind of this Morris character, that he has to be in sleazy nightclubs to keep food on the table and try to make money. And then we see that there is conflict within the neighborhood because of his mom and her behavior. And again, that's conflict within the home and then to the neighborhood. So there are some pieces that it's very clear that Prince understands how place and social interactions are occurring. And so moving into the larger setting, let's see. I didn't check the time. How am I? Okay. What's interesting about this next section, where he starts to talk about the larger setting, is that now this is the first time in that first section, he doesn't mention the race of the characters. But here in the structural pieces, he starts to mention more about the setting and where people are located in these three settings. So where Morris is, downtown, that's the ghetto, is predominantly Black. But there is some resistance here that he shows, is that people downtown take pride in their appearance, especially when they're out for a night on the town. And again, I think that, again, some inferring here is that, yes, it's because of their own choices, but also, right, he's setting up this idea that there's conflict between where different people are located and how they're perceived, and how location is and segregation is impacting those perceptions. And so he puts Vanity in the suburbs, the rich part of town, and then we get more, right? How do the people from downtown even perceive people who are in the suburbs? They call it Green Acres. He relabels it. And then he also talks through, Vanity actually has these parents who are supposed to be strict. And then again, the geography limiting access to certain places where these nightclubs downtown are actually off limits. And so there's an awareness, right? Or it's something that's being shown to show these ideas about how these are segregated spaces. Then he places himself, and after he has the parents actually pass away in this summary of Purple Rain, right? The mom ends up killing the dad and herself. And so he grows up. He was born, which is I think is different, interesting here. He has himself born in the downtown area, um, and this is where he mentions what his race would be in the script. Here he says he was born of Italian and Black descent. In this part, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that says which parent is which in this scripting. He just says born of Italian and Black descent. But he then moves again. Prince is moving out of, he was born in what was again called the ghetto or Black area of town after his parents pass away, and then he moves uptown, right? A peaceful atmosphere, and we've heard about uptown in other work by Prince, particularly the song Uptown, where white, Black, Puerto Rican, gay, straight, young, and old, everyone living here is laid back. It's peaceful. He names this space as peaceful. And so, like I said, I think what's happening here is that Prince understands, right, how space is being divided, space is being traversed. He's born in a particular place, but he doesn't limit himself, and he moves into another space, uptown. I think it's interesting that the way he gets to uptown, though he was born downtown, is through this passing of his parents. And I think that is a symbolism in itself to kind of what we see later on. Right, he's struggling with some inner pieces, and so him moving into a different space is kind of right also coming into his own and shedding some of these pieces. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And then we see more interactions about based on space and place and segregation, right? So the kids from downtown dislike the kids from Green Acres, and occasionally there are fights, and so we see conflict there. And then so the parents of the kids in Green Acres are encouraged to hang out in their own clique. And I think again, these sensibilities I think they're based in reality and how things actually happen in the real world. Do we see these actually play out in the film that we know? Not exactly. So how might that have made for a different film? And it's interesting that, again, there's not physical conflict that he places between his own character and Morris Day. He just says there are various comments and there's an aim to get along, but they ultimately have a lifestyle. Because of their lifestyle, they still continue to have this conflict. And I think that is back to how he's understanding how place kind of interacts with a person and the choices that they make, and that they just can't see eye to eye in some ways. What I really find fascinating about this script, and again, in thinking about how is Prince representing Blackness, how is he understanding how racism is interacting and affecting different people's life choices. In this script, the time is actually victorious, kind of a thing in this scripting. And it's because Prince kind of fails with all the inner turmoil that he's going through, his erratic performance on the stage, which does come through a little bit in the movie Purple Rain, but that's what ultimately keeps him from actually winning in the sense of how he's showing up on stage and in society. And I'll get back to the point I'll make about that later. But the idea that the time or Morris Day kind of representing downtown or Blackness, I think that is a key point, that if that is an alternate ending, that we see this Black band actually make it or succeed, that's a different scripting, I believe, and it does something different to show how Minneapolis, or what he's assuming needs to happen in Minneapolis, in terms of who needs to be successful, who needs to be on stage, and who needs to be seen. But I don't think that he leaves his character as not winning. I don't have a piece to show that. But he ends up kind of going through the motions of killing off whatever is causing all of this conflict. And then he says, he wakes up and it was all a dream. I think it was him working through all of these things that he's going through in terms of, who is he? How is he navigating all of these multiple worlds and moving in and out of these spaces? And I think there are both wins in that. And I think that does parallel Blackness in reality, and that you are traversing the world and you are moving through all of these different locations, and racism and race is playing a part. And I think that what's happening is we see on an individual level and a societal level that he's trying to show how that does play out, and you can still, again, as he's trying to say, if you want something, go for it. But what are the things that you need to do to kind of overcome that and resist? So, in closing, I hope that I've convinced you that Prince is a Black geographer or doing Black world making, and the fact that he's showing how, social interactions are part of how people are interacting and moving through space in Minneapolis, and how racism or race is playing a part in doing that. And we get a story to go along with that, to document and also show how again, space and place is being reconstructed and is also not limiting people. And he gives his characters, which in this instance would have been all Black, the freedom to be able to explore that. And we know, what does remain, even in the sense of traditional geography, Prince is a Black geographer, because he knew that was not Lake Minnetonka.